friends. It's only been 2 weeks since my last letter to you, and I never imagined that I'd get to write you a second one so soon. But all things in their season. And this season seems to bring a lot of joy. For this letter, I'm so excited to share with you my love of nature and what that means for the future. But before I get too distracted about my excitement over nature and natural dying, I wanted to update you on the sweater that I shared with you in my last video, the Supermoon sweater by Vera. Last time we chatted, I was struggling. It was maybe not the right time for me to work on the project, or maybe I just didn't have the right tools. Which means that when I tell you I'm finally at a point where I'm working on a second sleeve, I cannot express how joyful I am. One of the things that really helped me feel like I got a groove with this project was working with the row counter that was actually gifted to me by Dawn of Twice Sheared Sheep. She had reached out and just very kindly offered to share some tools that she thought would be helpful, and I can't tell you how much I needed this. Something about working 2 different stitch patterns in a sleeve where you alternate skeins each row, and having to physically jot down or set my project aside to keep track of the row was a challenge. Not so much anymore. Which reminds me to say thank you. I talked about struggling with this project, both here and on Instagram, and so many of you reached out with advice and suggestions, ideas to try that might help me get through this sweater, and it meant the world to me. Quite a few of you suggested I try the interchangeable shorties, and honestly, it needs to be added to my list, because I'm still doing magic loop, and it works. But it makes me wonder how much a difference treating ourselves to the right tools can make in terms of just getting us through challenging times, challenging moments, because even a craft that brings us joy isn't perfect, and it doesn't need to be. But I'm finally so glad to be in a place where joy is centered in this work. From a place where I felt like progress was such a battle to nearly having a second sleeve done has brought me so much happiness. The project isn't perfect. No project really is. But I'm feeling inspired again. And being able to knit on this piece while sitting outside as summer creeps its way in, and just seeing the colors of nature reflected in the fabric itself, it's a beautiful reminder. And I'm excited to keep working on this. There are a few things about the pattern that frustrate me, and I would change in retrospect. For example, the pattern leaves a hole under one of the sleeves, and it's not something I thought about when I was knitting it up initially, but it's a little frustration that, in retrospect, I think I would change. Cast on some underarm stitches, or do something different to make that a little bit cleaner, but looking at my first sleeve, it seems like the seaming is going okay. And honestly, I'm trying to remind myself that I have the power to be flexible, to change things, to reinvent patterns or alter them to suit me. And I'm thinking about what that might mean to knit this a second time. But if I'm being honest with you, it might take a while for me to knit a second one of these, because I've been watching podcasts lately. CeCe by the Young Folk Knits, for example, has knitted some amazing summer tops, and I've decided that I really should knit something summery. And while I'm knitting something summery, why not actually dye the yarn for it? So I'm trying to get a little bit closer to nature, and I can't really think of a better way to do that than with natural or botanical dyeing. The first challenge I'm trying to give myself is to pick a design and then to dye the yarn for it and create a project. But I thought before I do that, I should probably do a trial run. Dye 1 or 2 skeins of yarn and see if I even like the process. So I did. I decided that the first place I wanted to try was dyeing with madder because, well, you know my love of moody tones, but summer requires a little more color. So I ordered some materials, and as soon as they arrived, immediately put things into the dye pot just to see what happened, what colors might emerge. And the entire process gave me so much respect for indie natural dyers. Truly, what they do is incredible work. But there's also something really magical about being able to try that yourself and seeing the magic of colors emerge from the dye pot, realizing that white yarn looks like this now. And I did that. But the thing about being a beginner at something is the combination of reckless excitement, where you want to try all the things at once, and the mistakes that happen in the process. In addition to madder, I threw a couple of skeins into a dye bath that had ground walnut. And while the color in the pot, while wet, seemed okay, I definitely made a mistake by not straining my dye bath before putting the yarn in. And when I tell you it took me so much time to rinse out this yarn, it's not an exaggeration. The complications also came from the difference between how yarn looks in a dye bath and how it looks when it's dried. On one hand, I love neutrals, and this walnut yarn would be a beautiful neutral, maybe even the body of a sweater, but when trying to dye for the first time, what I really wanted were colors that might work better for summer or spring. I don't know. But I looked at this yarn and thought, this isn't quite what I was aiming for. And thinking back on my first time dyeing, one of the things I became worried about was, how can I use my dye stuffs most effectively? It felt kind of wasteful to use a dye bath only once, but I didn't need to dye a ton of yarn. So when I looked at this dried skein, I thought, maybe I can recreate it. So I dropped it into the madder dye bath from earlier to over dye it just to see what happened. And well, my, did I love this so much better. First time and you think to yourself, I just want to see if I like it. I just want to try. And then you end up with a full-blown obsession. That's what it was like going through this dye process for the first time for me. Seeing the different ways that you could prepare the yarn and just envisioning what the yarn would be, and then watching it transition from white to what it looked like in the dye bath, to seeing it dry, to seeing the final product. I am absolutely hooked and can't wait to try new things, which means that I've decided to spend this next year exploring, getting a little closer to nature, botanically dyeing, and maybe doing that together with you. Because for the next year, I've decided I'm going to explore natural dyeing. I'm going to be a beginner at something completely new, and I'm just going to see what it creates and what we can create together. We know that the dark skeins that came from this actually came from a mistake, and I don't know really anything about natural dyeing. But what I do know is I loved the feeling I got from it. I loved knowing that the flowers and plants in my garden can create these colors. And I love the idea of being able to explore some of that magic and that messiness with you. Which means I've decided to do a natural make-along for the year. More than anything, I envision this as a space where we can explore together, where we can try natural dyeing, eco-printing, bundle dyeing, or just working with naturally dyed yarns by some of the brilliant indie dyers out there. Some flowers aren't suitable for dyeing, but isn't it fun to explore, to test the limitations, to see the magic that you can create in your own backyard? If you'd like to join me in exploring this, please follow these videos, I suppose, to see the mess and the mistakes that I make. But if you're on Instagram, also use the hashtag StitchWitchNaturalMakeAlong so you can connect with other people who are just exploring nature, finding connections and inspirations, and thinking about the possibilities. Sometimes we think, I should try this. I should try this. I should maybe try this. But somehow we never find time. If anything, I hope that this is a space where we can find time together and find inspiration in those connections. If you were to try naturally dyeing today, what would you want to make? What do you find most interesting or inspiring? I'm still trying to figure out what my goals might be for this year. If anything, I think I want to give myself flexibility. But I love the idea of being able to make gifts, to take undyed yarn and to dye it myself using things that I've foraged or just closely connected with nature, and then to turn them into gifts. Naturally dyed mittens, or a scarf, or maybe most ambitiously a sweater. There's so many possibilities. And the reality is that I'm a beginner. I'm completely new to everything when it comes to natural dyes, but I want to embrace this with childish joy, the willingness to make mistakes. I don't know. I just know that I want to start, and it'd be beautiful to be able to do that with a project that keeps me close to nature. Because gardening brings me joy, and it feels silly to say, but gardening is one of the things that really inspired me to explore this. But I'll admit, looking at all of the different components of natural dye and thinking about what it means to connect with nature and maybe dye from plants in my own garden has been a little overwhelming. This is the first year that I've been able to do seeds at my home, and thinking about how to do that, how to integrate things without putting too much pressure on myself was a lot. Which means that I'm so happy to share with you a giveaway that I'm doing. Alejandra of A Woolen Forest is a brilliant fiber artist and natural dyer, and she was kind enough to gift one person access to her online course on designing your own natural dye garden, as well as seeds if you would like to get started. So if you would like a chance to be able to have an expert's insight in how to plan a natural dye garden and some seeds to get you started, please just tell me below. What inspires you about natural dyeing? What would you like to explore? Leave a comment. Make sure to subscribe to myself and Alejandra, and I'll make sure to share the winner with you the next time I post a video. for indulging me, for maybe joining me on a journey of natural dyeing, and simply for welcoming me in this space. Natural dyeing is a way for me to get closer to fiber arts, a way to respect the planet around me and see its beautiful potential. If it's something you'd like to do with me, I'd love to hear about your project ideas. I'd love to see your work. If anything else, I just truly appreciate that you give me space here, that you share it with me as I think about what I can create with what nature so generously gives.